Hey guys, thanks for joining us today on the Untrained Philosophical Discussionist podcast. This is episode 43, and we talk about and digest different ways on how you can go about expanding your walk with Christ.
Yeah, if you're looking to get deeply involved with Jesus and you want to be used greater for the kingdom, this conversation that we had today was specifically focused to help you do that.
Episode starts now. Stick around.
Welcome to the UPD podcast.
Designed to point men towards Jesus.
Real life, real talk. Join us. I'm Andy Lamb.
I'm Jonny Hanson.
This is the UPD podcast. Bring Carl. There's Carl. It's been 2 weeks since I got to celebrate with Carl. I missed him.
It's been so long I forgot to press a button. Jeez. Hey guys, thanks for joining us here on UPD. My name's Jonny Hanson.
And I'm Andy Lamb. We are the Untrained Philosophical Discussionists. And we got about 100 years of experience of making life's mistakes. And our goal of this podcast is just to kind of come together, talk through our mistakes. And as we reflect, how could we do better and be better men for our families and those around us, man.
Yeah, this is episode 43. We titled it Walking with God, but it's also like choosing your adventure and what's the next adventure God has for me.
Yeah.
And how to go about finding that, I think we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, I'll encourage you, if you have if you don't follow us normally, the conversation we had last week about how to start a relationship with God, I think it'll be super important for you to check that out and listen to that as we kind of get into this series. That's how we do things here. We kind of try to unpack these big ideas. We try to stick about an hour and 20 minutes just to kind of keep people's attention. If we find anything longer than that, it's kind of tough to hear everything. But I would encourage you, if you have not yet listened to our podcast before this, go ahead and check that out. And while you're at it, like and subscribe and follow us. You can do that on YouTube and Instagram and TikTok and Facebook. It's the best way that you can show support to us.
Yeah, it is a podcast. It's a standalone podcast as well. Obviously, we do this here for an hour and 20, and it's on YouTube that way. It's on Spotify that way, Apple Podcasts, you name it. It's on all the platforms. You can also reach us at updpodcast@gmail.com. So if you have like a comment or maybe a show idea or a topic you'd like discussed, you can hit us up that way too, and we'll check those out.
Yeah, we want this to be interactive, and so we believe that this is a God-led podcast. We try to pray a lot. We really try to think a lot about what are some of the big topics that we can discuss that will help you along the way. But, we would love to hear ideas from you. We love the interaction from people. And we started doing some interviews as well. And so we just recently released one with Dave Fox, who is an elder at Grace Church. He's 942 years old, so he brings a lot of wisdom to the table. And you're going to see Pastor Mike Adkins coming out. We'll be doing some other interviews after that. So we're looking forward to...
Yeah, next week will be the interview with Mike Adkins.
Yeah.
Pastor Mike.
Absolutely. You want to check that out.
So yeah, as Andy said, with episode 42, we kind of set up maybe a mapping of how you could go about trying to start a relationship with Christ if you've maybe had your heart stirred. So we set out kind of a formula that we thought works to kind of get yourself engaged from just those initial steps of asking Christ into your heart and what that looks like, walking all the way through kind of some of the first steps you'll want to take to getting into groups, getting into your church, finding a church, and then becoming an active member of the church. And those are some of those first steps, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
And kind of laying out at that point in time, too, like, why would I even need God?
Yeah.
And I think we went pretty well into that. And I wanted this to be kind of where we start here again this week, if we can. I know we've got a proverb here we do those weekly. But kind of keeping in the back of your mind, if you are someone that doesn't know Jesus, that doesn't think maybe you have an interest in Jesus, I'd posit this question. I'd ask you to ask yourself it, which is if there's even a 0.01% chance that me and this guy are right and that all the other Christians across the world are right and that there is a God, a benevolent God who's overlooking everything and is the creator of the universe and has a formula to be with him for eternity, you might want to consider, just if that is the case, if there's even a possibility, why not flush that idea all the way out? See it through, see what's there. Maybe you'll still come to the same conclusion at the end that we're just two dopes, we don't know anything, and we believe in fairy tales. That's fine. But at least do yourself the service of looking into it first and seeing what is there.
Yeah,
Scour all corners.
I agree. I think that's such an important question to ask. What is the relevance of God? Is he real? Is he who he says he is? Does he even exist? And the reason why Johnny and I are so sure in our faith is because we walk this ugly life of addiction, and we're on the other side of this now. And even if what we are believe is not real, I still find that living in this frame of life brings so much more hope and peace to people. We see it over and over and over again where people come out of that world whose lives are radically transformed into something different. And it's why I believe in miracles. It's why I believe there is a God, because we go from death to life. And why would somebody choose to walk a different path if they didn't wholeheartedly believe that there was something else out there that was greater than themselves, that was bringing a better existence to what they had going on in their lives than they did before?
That's well said. Absolutely.
Yeah.
As I said, we start with a proverb every day. Today's proverb is going to be Proverbs 13 and 20. Do you want to read it?
I do. Here's what I love about the Proverbs, by the way. It's just the simplicity of this.
Yeah.
Whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm.
Repeat it.
Whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm. I don't have to be a Christian to read that and go,
Truism.
that's a truism. Like, that's just something that happens in life, that whether you believe in the God, in this guy God or not, you can read that and go, that's just called discernment.
Hey guys, if you're enjoying this content, we just ask you to go on and like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Comments mean all the difference in the world.
Yeah, the views, the subscriptions, everything you do is what helps support our mission, and it's what makes us move forward further. So thank you for your support.
Now back to the show. Yeah, if I'm hanging out with wise people and I'm paying attention, I'm going to glean some of that wisdom off them.
Yeah, chances are.
It's very likely.
Yep.
If I'm hanging out with people acting crazy, I'm going to get pulled up into some crap. How many times in your life were you with some homies, y'all are wilding out, they're wilding out. Maybe you always had that one dude who's way more wilding out than everybody else, and you'd go like, hey man, you're going to get us into some serious trouble. The rest of us are trying to like walk the line of trouble.
Yeah.
But your crazy ass going to get us into some deep doo-doo here.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, I was usually that guy.
What do they say? Hey, oh, duh. We've talked about your story. What were they about to get you on? An actual crime? Did you actually do anything, or were they going to get you on conspiracy?
Well, I had actually done it, but they didn't catch me. But it didn't matter.
It's still conspiracy.
It's still conspiracy. So,
and it's the homies you're hanging with that'll get you caught up and dialed up into that whole thing. It wasn't you initially they were looking at. They're looking at the guy over here who's so wilding out.
Yeah.
And then again, they see you associating with them, and they know that you're part of it.
They do.
It's as simple as that. I remember I lived in Minneapolis for a number of years. I lived in Northeast Minneapolis. If anybody's from there, it's not good. They got they hang shoes from different light posts to let you know what gang area you're in.
Mm-hmm.
We have blue shoes by ours. And I lived with this dude who was Somali guy. He had moved to the States from Somalia. He was a nice enough guy. I thought at work he had an extra room for rent, and I needed a room to rent. And he had this big, cool house. And again, he seemed cool. Like I'd known him for maybe 6-8 months through work. And he said, hey man, I got a room, you can rent it. And it was cheap. And I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, who cares? I'm not worried about violent gangs around me. I'm cool. I don't make eye contact. I'm hopping out whatever I'm in. I'm walking straight to a door. I'm not trying to associate. I knew I could get by. I'd done it before. But I didn't realize, like, living with this guy for even a short period of time, which I think I lived with him for maybe 60 days. And it turns out, like, every night he's having, like, homies over, and they're wilding out. And he was, like, a Muslim who drank. So I don't think he's much of a Muslim, frankly. One thing leads to another, and I came home from work, and there's maybe, like, 13 guys in the house, and there's one woman that's there, and she's screaming at these guys about this and that, and they're all speaking a language I don't understand. And I was freaking out, and I got the heck out of there. Minutes later, the police show up. They're putting everybody into handcuffs. I don't know who's doing what. And I remember at the very end of this whole thing, I didn't get in any trouble, But I remember one of these cops, I had to put handcuffs. I was in handcuffs too. Everybody's in handcuffs. They don't fool around. When they show up and stuff is wild and accusations being thrown around, they lock everyone until they get the scene cleared. So multiple hours later, they're taking these handcuffs off me. And this guy's looking around. And I mean, he could see it from a million miles away. He looks around, he goes, something's out of place here. And it's you. What is this? What are you involved in? You speak this language? I said, no. He goes, well, what are you doing here? And I said, I'm just renting a room. He goes, think you should rent a room somewhere else.
Mm.
Or this stuff's going to end up being your permanent place. We're just going to take you away next time. We don't ask questions next time. Thankfully, I was smart enough, and I was a pretty heavy alcoholic at this time. I was smart enough, at least in that alcoholic phase, to go, yeah, I'm getting out of here. I didn't stay at that house one more night. I moved into a different place that day. I didn't have any work. I couldn't fool around with whatever that environment was. I don't even know what happened to that guy. The point is weeks earlier, I seen that stuff was kind of wild, and he was kind of a wild guy, and some things that he had presented at work weren't translating at the house. And rather than trying to confront some of these things and be wise, I'm hanging with this fool. And then I get rolled up in all his foolishness. And that's inevitably what ends up happening if you're associating with fools. Mm-hmm. So that's why verses like this are so important. I can read this and still walk away and go hang out with some fools if I want to.
Right.
It doesn't make this statement any less true.
Yeah.
And it really is. We've talked about this in weeks in advance. We were talking about raising up your kids. And that's what's so important today for Andy and I is we recognize the foolishness of our past, and we try to teach our kids while they're young this kind of stuff. Like, hey, bud, because nobody ever said this to me. Proverbs 13:20, whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm. My dad said plenty of times, that kid's a trouble.
Right.
Stay away from him.
Yeah.
But he never told me hey, there's a smart kid. Why don't you try to associate yourself with them? There wasn't that contrast, and it certainly wasn't biblically. I didn't grow up in that kind of a house. But we're trying to help our kids to see this stuff now. Hey, here's the better path.
That's right.
That's the whole point of the show.
It's very often, anytime anything goes awry, usually what you'll always hear is, I had these friends, right? And even if you had read that verse to me at the age of 22 when I was wilding out, I don't even know that I would have listened anyways, because I'd already been wilding out. So that's
22
why
22 is a bit late probably to learn that message.
For sure it is. And so, I have these conversations with my kids now of who you surround yourself with. So important that I talked to you about my middle son. We had to cut his friends off completely.
Yeah, you said one of the kids
died of a drug overdose.
Yeah.
Right. So it's being able to see that, but it's being able to have the conversation of why.
Right.
Right. Not just setting some hard, fast rule of just oh, don't do that. It's don't do that. Here's why. And this verse just resonates. When you set that over to me, I was like, that verse is perfect. This just explains everything, every conversation I have with my boys about who you're surrounding yourself with. Mm-hmm. You're, as Pastor Rick Garrett said, you're a sum total of the people you spend the time with in your life, right? And so who we choose to hang out with, and that puts us into the next, just spins us right perfectly into our conversation today of if you want to be a mature Christian and walk with Christ, you have to surround yourself with people who have been walking that path for a while. And it's not just so that I am strengthened, but it's also so that I can learn. That's why we had Dave Fox on here, is because he's so much further ahead of us. And so Dave has helped us talk about, what are some pitfalls you need to watch out while you're in your 40s and your 50s and your 130s, right?
Yeah. A couple of things that you made me think of there, Jack Rapp, who I credit so much of the transformation of my heart towards Christ with, that was one of the things that he was wise. He's gone to be with Jesus now, but he's such a wise guy. And man, I gleaned so much from him in such a short period of time that I had him in my life. I told you about when he walked in the room, he didn't have to say much, just something came off him. But every word he said was an impactful word. He would sit at the back of the room, because we'd go to these groups and stuff too, outside of this campus that we were all on in the recovery place. We go to these off-site places too and do these groups. Mm-hmm. And he would watch everyone, and he would listen. He'd soak everything up, and he was almost always the last guy to speak. And whatever he'd say, it was 90 seconds worth of brilliance. You'd record it and write it down and show it to people, and they go, who is this prophet? And it was like this accumulation of everything he heard throughout the day, he would just pull it all together. He'd like snatch this and this and this and this, and he'd set it down in his mind.
Yeah.
He never had anything. He was never writing anything down. He'd just like catch all these snippets, and then he'd boil it down into this one brilliant idea capsule that you could swallow and take away this huge thing from each time. And our pastor, Pastor Mike, who you guys will get to see here shortly, when I first started going to his church, I've talked about this, and I think I might have mentioned it when we were interviewing him. One of the things that really attracted me to his teaching was the first time I ever seen him preach, he brought up a topographical map of the road to, I forget what the name of the road is. The Samaritan's Road.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he goes, this was some hardcore geography. Like, you had to go over boulders and rocks, and there's wooded area, and there's all this, there's places all over where bandits could hide and rob you.
It was a dangerous road.
It was a dangerous road, but he showed pictures of it, and he got into this picture painting, and then he unpacked the Bible verse. And I thought, who's this dude?
Mm-hmm.
What is his background in? In fact, so much so that I stayed afterwards. I don't know if I mentioned this in the other pod, but I stayed afterwards and caught him outside because I went to the last sermon for the day, and I just waited outside. I was by my motorcycle, and I seen him come out, and I hot-tailed it over to him and say, hey, man, what's your background in? And then we started talking, and he invited me out for lunch. I think we had lunch shortly thereafter the first time. And I say that to say this, like, you see these people that are intelligent, charismatic, and really have they're settled though too. That's the thing. It's not like this erratic energy of intelligence that you can see on TV sometimes from some folks that are smart. I'm separating it from that. I'm saying there is a security, a peace that is settled upon this intelligence as well. So there's this well-rounded nature about an individual that is attractive. And then you find out that's because of Jesus. And that's where, you hang with these wise and you'll become wise.
Yeah.
Is because all of that starts to like exude off them. And then as you go to the ultimate source of knowledge, you go to God, which is where they got theirs. All of a sudden you start realizing like, oh, this is a fountain that overfloweth with all those characteristics that are attractive. Yeah.
Yeah. Which I think what we need to be wise even in that though, because you have these charismatic, great speaking, sound intelligent people, but
they have the fruits of the Spirit.
They don't have
you can check against.
That's right. Exactly.
There's a great list biblically. Yep. Where's that found at?
It's found in, I think it's Ephesians.
Okay.
The fruit of the Spirit. We'll look it up.
Yeah. Now you want to look that up, fruits of the Spirit?
I'll look it up. Now keep going. That's going to drive me nuts.
When it lists the fruits of the Spirit, it lists all these things. So that's how you can go about saying like, okay, so this guy has some good qualities, but is he a snake?
I'm sorry, it's Galatians, yeah. Galatians 5:22 and 23.
Will you read it?
Yeah, absolutely.
You can ask yourself, is this guy like a snake oil salesman or is he the real deal? And then you'll start looking for these fruits of the Spirit. Does he display these? By the way, it'll take a while. So that's why we're constantly talking about relationships in here and having these relationships where you spend time with someone that's important to you, that you think might be important, is you take that time, you try to identify these characteristic traits. And that, again, that takes the time. So when you do, then it's like, oh, okay, so they are manifesting these externally as well. Boy, this is probably a good person for me to continue spending time with.
Yeah, it's great, man. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law. And so the question we ask is, how do you know somebody is a follower of Christ? And the Bible talks a lot about this. You'll know their mind by their fruit. And so when they talk about fruit, they're talking about what is the evidence of their life that they're followers of Christ. Well, they're peaceful, and they're gentle, and they're kind, and they're loving. Those are the attributes we want to look at. So if you're looking to follow somebody, you have some new hot, flashy pastor who comes on the scene who's super charismatic, who can speak well and you find life from. before that person, just because they can speak well, doesn't mean it's somebody that you should be following. So we have to look at the whole of their life and go, well, does the evidence of their life show that they're loving and peaceful? Because that is somebody that truly has the Holy Spirit, and that is the person that you want to follow, is somebody that is exuding the fruits of the Spirit. Part of wisdom is this idea of discernment. And discernment is basically you being able to look at the situations going on and making a right decision using the wisdom that God has given you. And that's what we talk about when we think about maturity as a Christian. So we started at the beginning of this, of the how-to, and you have to know the Bible, because by me knowing the Bible, then I know what to look for, and I know when somebody's speaking something that is not in the Bible, then I'm able to speak against that. No, that's somebody that I don't want to follow. But very often, I think the devil, where he's really creative, is that he can use somebody even within the church. Because
Frequently within the church. Why not? That's probably the best place.
it's greatest place to deceive people. I can keep you guys captivated right here and make you think that you're a follower of Christ, and then at the end you're not. And it's because we have this idea of this performance base. Like, listen, we'll get into this here, but what we do matters. But what I'm doing doesn't matter in the way that God looks at me. It just matters in the way that I want to be effective for Christ and be used as a tool by Him to help advance His mission.
Right.
But very often, because of spiritual immaturity, it's you're just not ready for that position just yet. You're not ready for that next step yet. And so we want you to be prepared for that next step. And the way that you get prepared for it is getting to know the Word. There was this pastor who was recently interviewed. His name's R.T. Kendall. And he's been in the ministry for 60 plus years. And they asked him, and they said, hey, if you were to give some words of wisdom to somebody who's new in the faith, what would you tell them that maybe was looking to become a pastor? And his words were, he said, I would tell them not to go to seminary. He said, I would tell them to do two things: know your Bible and pray. By knowing your Bible and praying is how you get to know who God is. He said, unfortunately, people go to get all these degrees and they become Pharisees and Sadducees. They know the law. Pastor Dave said this when we interviewed him last week. He said he's a recovering Pharisee because you get to know the law. I know all the rules, but there's no fruit in my life. I just get to know what this book, and I get to walk around with my degree to tell you that I have this degree, that I have this PhD, and there's no love in it. And so the best thing we can do is know the Bible well and spend time with God praying. And that's how we are able to be used by God the most, is when I just get to know who He is and I spend time with Him.
Gosh, I think that's a great jumping off point for this episode here. This is so interesting. So this morning, I read a devotional app every morning. It goes along with my Bible reading. So I read the Bible, and then I read this devotional app. This is this morning's. It says, reach out for Him. Acts 17:27, that they should seek the Lord, if perhaps they might reach out for Him and find Him, though He is not far from each one of us. This person then goes on to write, it was my first week in college that I really reached out for God. I was new and nameless on a giant liberal campus. My family was en route to their home 2,000 miles away for the first time in my life. I had no accountability. I realized I could decide to follow Jesus as I'd been taught in my childhood, or not. In my dorm room, I chose to give God a chance to lead my new freedom. I told Him so, and then I started reaching. I began my mornings with Him. I found a Bible study. I visited churches. Regardless of who was around, I prayed at meals. I began to find God paving my way. I began to find God seekers all over my path. Reaching, striving, seeking takes effort. It begins with words, perhaps, but then involves eyes, feet, hands, and heart. Like seeking a job, a new home, sobriety, good health, a spouse, or a college major, reaching takes strides. Jesus reaches for His Father during 40 days of fasting in the desert. He continued to reach for Him every time He snuck away to pray. The Bible says, try me, look for me, ask me. Or as Matthew 7:7 puts it, seek, and you will find, knock, and the door will be opened. Reach out for God, and He will undoubtedly reach back to you. That was this morning's.
I love it when God does that.
Huh?
I love it when God does that.
What?
Yeah.
When you find out what I've been working on this week, it's all in there. This is. I was like, oh,
Basically, it was a summary of everything you
thanks
wrote
for
down.
summarizing mine, God. I'm end of the show. I'm done. Thank you.
Thanks for checking us out today.
Welcome and goodbye. So, my first question is why keep digging in? Because that's kind of this next phase. So you've already done, if you've checked out episode 42, which is our previous episode, we already kind of barked at you about that one, but please check it out. Episode 43 today, it's like the question you're probably asking yourself is, yeah, but I'm saved. Why keep digging in? Aren't I saved? Can't I just go to heaven now and be with Jesus? Mm-hmm. I'm told the answer is yes. But is that all you want? Mm-hmm. Is that the end of you wanting anything from the creator of the universe? I mean, if you're already believing that far, why not just believe a little further and say, like, what's your highest and best for me? What adventure do you have? Mm-hmm. I mean, all these biblical people that you'll read about, if you're following the guidelines here of checking out the Bible daily, all these guys were on adventures constantly. I think God is the God of adventure. I think he has the next purpose for you. He's got the next purpose for me. I think we're on mission right now doing this podcast. Mm-hmm. This was our purpose for this season of our life. We'll see how long it goes.
Yeah.
But both of us were praying for a next thing, and this became it.
That's it.
And I think at different seasons of life, you have these opportunities. Because God saved me at 29. I didn't know Jesus before that. So he saves me at 29, and because he's gracious, he gives me a good chunk of time. And he's asked for other things from me since then, yeah? He's wanted me to, like, step up and do better and da-da-da-da, and he prompts my heart and leads my heart, and as I read more, it changes the way I think about things. But eventually, we got to a point where, like a jackrabbit, I needed to do something that showed others who came from my place that there is something here. Yeah. I've walked this land for a while now. This is good soil. Join me.
Yeah.
You know? So I was really feeling that pressing, and that, that's my digging in. But then it required more. It's like, hey, now you need to really up your devotion here, Johnny. And you need to really spend some time with me, is God saying. You're not just waking up and reading the Bible and then heading out your day and you forget about me all day. I want to be in relationship with you consistently. I want you coming to me throughout the day and saying, here's where we're at. Here's where we're at. What do you think, God? That's the pressing of my heart. Yeah,
absolutely.
And there's more of that. And then it makes me want to know more. So really, if you're asking yourself at all, okay, here's where I'm at. Jesus. Okay, great. And maybe you're on that honeymoon time is what I kind of call it for myself. It's like you get saved and all the burdens all the dark stuff that you held inside of your heart and your soul, the relief of that is fantastic. Mm-hmm. And you get like a buzz off it. I did.
Spiritual high.
Yeah. But eventually that kind of just gets back into the monotony of life. Mm-hmm. And you kind of lose that. And that's, Christ talks about those different seeds that get planted in the different soils and the growth of these plants. And some of them, they shoot up right away, but because they don't have good firm roots, the sun hits and then they're faded away. And I think that sun hitting and faded away is that after that honeymoon period where you can just kind of get a little lully in your relationship and then maybe you're not going and you can fade on away if you're not intentional.
Yeah. You said something there that I think we really need to hit on. We have a relational God. Right. So it's all throughout the day. It's checking in with God, listening to a song. I'm praying. I'm reading something. I always look at it relationally with my wife. Like throughout the day, we're texting each other. I'm calling her. I'm FaceTiming her. I'm sending her a message. Why? Because I want her to know that throughout the day, I'm thinking about her, that I'm not just out here grinding all day long and that she's
not even grinding or just I don't think about you at all. Yeah. I leave the house in the morning and there's a vacancy where you exist everywhere else.
Yeah.
And then I come home and it's like, oh, hey, you're here.
Yeah. But a lot of people, I think, treat the relationship with Christ like that.
I think they treat their own house like that.
Yeah, for sure. And if your goal is to grow and to advance in a relationship, it requires time, right? That's the only way you build relationships. Of
course.
And so it's taking these steps every day to further that relationship. So that's why I spend so much time with Jesus throughout the day. And they're glimpses. It's not just...
Why do you do it?
Because for me, Like I know that if I don't, then my mind starts to veer. I start to think differently. I start to act differently.
And what would be wrong with that?
You take little steps in the wrong direction, and eventually you don't even know you're taking steps away.
Where do you think you'd find yourself?
I don't know that I necessarily would find myself off the deep end like I'd have before, but I find
Could you?
myself absolutely. I never want to say, "Oh no, I got this," right? Because we've seen that time and time again happen with people who step in with confidence and go, "I've got this sin handled," and then they let their guard down, and then before they know it, they're right back into that sin pattern again. So I know me well enough to know that if I don't stay connected to Jesus throughout the day, that my mind I just start thinking differently. I start
Sure.
acting differently. I start really being inward focused. I start getting worried. I become unpeaceful. Like the fruits of the Spirit begin to disappear
Sure do.
when I get unconnected from Jesus. And I've done it enough times in my Christian walk.
Oh, and you'll do it again.
For sure
And
I
again
will.
and again and again.
For sure I will. But I've done it enough times in my Christian walk where I just stop spending those glimpses with Christ throughout the day, and then I just start. I can feel it, and then it's all of a sudden it's 2 weeks in. And you're like, why am I having all these lustful thoughts, and why am I being, just so worrisome? Why am I being a dick to my wife? And oh, it's because I've stopped being present with Christ throughout the day, and so that's that spiritual maturity that comes along the way of you spending time with Christ every day. That I know these other paths so well, and I know me so well that if I don't do it this way, then I can't be used by Christ for the most purpose that he wants to use me if I'm not relational with him and being plugged into him every day.
Intentional.
That's it. That's it. And but it's the intentionality of doing, when we say intentionality, we want to make sure that we're focused within that intentionality. I can be intentional about something and not act upon it.
Okay, so what would be, lay this out for me.
Yeah.
How do you go about being intentional towards Christ on a daily basis?
I think that's going to be different for everybody.
Okay.
But my intentionality of Christ every day is I have to start at the beginning of the day with him. I just do.
How do you do that?
Routine.
Yeah.
Get up, I go to the gym, come home, and I read. That's just my day every day. I have to do it that way. If I don't do it that way, then
What do you do when you're on vacation?
get up in the morning and read.
I know.
My Bible's in my backpack.
We've went on many fishing trips.
Yeah.
We sit down together at the coffee table at the place we're at, and we both read our Bible.
We do.
And then we'll discuss it for a bit too, yeah?
It just comes with me everywhere I go. It's like packing my toiletry bag, right? I just went on.
I've forgotten my toothbrush, but I haven't forgotten my Bible.
It's when
that's not a brag. I'm not trying to
it's
sound
truth.
pious.
Yeah.
It's just literally, I know myself so much. This is why I'm digging at you to get this info. I'm with you, brother. Like, I have to be plugged in all the time. Because I do think that my missteps lead me right back to hanging with fools.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about this episode 5, I think, where initially you push back on me a bit. You go, you think you could start drinking again? And I said, I don't ever want to find out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I possibly could. How do you know? Because people have done it. I think of, what's that actor's name? God, he was brilliant. Philip Seymour Hoffman. One of the best
We were
actors.
just talking about him last weekend.
Is that
man.
right?
This is people, yeah. He
One
was
of the best actors of all time.
Guy
God,
named-
everything he's in, I watch, and I just watch him, and he was so phenomenal. And I don't know how much of this is truth or not, but I heard he had been sober for a long time. He went to a party. They were serving champagne at this party. It was like a New Year's party. And he had a glass of champagne. And that was it for that night. And this is so familiar to me. The last time I drank, this is very familiar to that. Has that one glass of champagne, and it was only a matter of time later, and he was dead. Because he went back to heroin. Died. The last time I drank, I had been planning it in my head for weeks, I'm sure. As I think about it, that's the case. And I had just but when I get, you start setting these goals for it, because it's going to be this big, fun event. And it wasn't. Duh. And we get into the calculus of Satan here too. I went to this bar. I got a drink. And again, 29 years old. I had gotten paid from a good job, so I had plenty of money. I had money to sit around for a minute money. And I knew that potential existed, but I thought, it's been so long since I drank. At that point in time, it had been like 9 months. it's been so long since I drank. Like, I can just come out one night and have a party. At least because I was so lonely and I was just so unfulfilled and I didn't know Jesus. I get this drink, and right when it settled into my stomach, I was like, oh no. I just felt this dread. So then I drank to get rid of the dread.
Mm.
The instant it hit me, the instant I felt myself losing control, I didn't like it. And I drank to not think about how much I didn't like that. So just that last time, I was drinking hard again. I didn't have any of the buffer, like I'm saying Philip Seymour Hoffman had, where he had that one champagne, but maybe he went home and got high. I don't know anything about him or his story after that. I just know he died from it. But I know, like, instantly I went and got liquor at a liquor store and then went home and then drank for 2 weeks straight. And was just like at the end of my rope and wanted to die. And I've told the rest of the story here.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I believe how close I could be if I just completely gave all this stuff up again. By the way, I'd lose my wife and my household, my family. Why? Because I'm the craziest guy ever? No. Just because the carnal version of myself that after all this time with God in changing, my wife only has known me as a Christ follower. So if I went back to being a non-Christ guy, I just don't think she'd like that guy. It's not the guy she married.
Yeah.
She's known a guy that's always aspiring to do the next thing in his life to try to make his life better and his family's life better. And it wasn't I wasn't like some evil villain when I used to drink. I was just not the best version of me, really. And I was a pretty crappy version of me, actually.
Yeah.
And I think I could go back to that if I just gave up on God and gave up on this routine, like you said, this dedication that I've formed in myself, that God's helped me to form, where I remain. And it's not like these rules, and like you said it before, and I think it's important to understate that not everybody's the same. For me, and knowing myself and having the discernment God given, I analyze my daily routines and go, these are necessary. That's why I would bring my Bible before I'd bring my toothbrush, because I know that I cling to that like a life preserver in the middle of the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to happen all the time so that I'm just dedicating that part of myself. Whether God's really excited about the 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes or 30 minutes, whatever it happens to be that day, it's also a part of me I'm unlocking and saying, God, I submit this to you.
Yeah. Absolutely, man.
And it keeps me knowing who the heck I am in this crazy universe that we live in.
It's that submission.
Yes.
Right. So when you submit your life to Christ, that
Right.
means I am living under full surrender. That means I am choosing to walk this path every single day. When you choose to step into the arena of leadership, and I believe that what we're doing is a leadership role, this podcast is because we are proclaiming to people our lives and how to follow Christ. And so when you step into the light and you begin to have a voice for Christ, it causes you, or it's necessary for you to be tied into Christ every single day, because when people are looking at you and they're watching at you, they're watching for your missteps. This isn't an act that you're never going to screw up. You don't have to walk around with the burden that I have to be a perfect person.
Sure.
But there is a part where I have to walk around to be a faithful person. And so we know the cheat code to be faithful. Like, we've learned it, right? And so once you learn the code to be faithful, then you have to live in it and you have to abide in it. When they asked me to become an elder, right? So this was I've told you this before, was at your wedding in 2018.
Yeah.
I'd made some choices and they wanted me to become an elder. That for me is an accountability.
Right.
Now I know that there are eyes watching me all the time, that there are probably people watching that go to Grace Church that see me out and about. I know there are people at the gym I go to that go to Grace Church. And so because of that, it's another level of accountability that I have to live my life in a certain way that represents.
Is that a burden or is that a pleasure?
I'm so glad you asked that question. So there's a verse in 1 Peter 5, 1 and 2. And Peter says this. He says, to the elders among you, be shepherds of God's flock that is under your care, watching over them, not because you must, but because you are willing, as God wants you to be, not pursuing dishonest gain, but eager to serve.
Mm.
And that verse has always resonated with me.
Because?
because I'm willing and I desire it and I enjoy it. So you asked me the question, is that a burden? No,
Mhm.
it's not. And the
But
reason,
it sounds like if there's a bunch of people watching you, like if I was micromanaged at work, that would suck.
yeah,
I I have a contracting company. I hate when the homeowner's home and then they're out pointing out a bunch of stuff that I already know
yeah,
time and time and time and time, going like, yeah, we'll get to that. I know.
yeah. Well,
But some people really want to be hands on. That's a burden. Their eyes are all over
mhm,
me and my work.
yeah. I
Something different happens when you're dedicating your time to God. What do you think that is?
the reward that comes with that.
What is that?
Um, the peace that surpasses all understanding is what comes with it. And so when you make the decision to walk with Christ, it's not an easy road. We've talked about that on here many times. It's not an easy road. It's so often people sell the gospel to people that if you just give your life to Jesus, that all your problems go away. And really, I believe your problems become amplified. The reason why I believe they become amplified is because for the first time, you're recognizing that they're actually problems and I have to deal with them and work on them. And so now there's work that needs to be done, and the devil's going to do everything he can in that moment to try to keep you held down in that place.
How about your problems become part of your purpose? What do I mean? I mean that all these things that used to be problems, all these little stumbling blocks for your life that kept you from the best direction you could be going in, were self-inflicted.
Most of them self-inflicted.
Almost all of them.
Yes.
Because they're perspectives.
Yeah.
And as God continues to shape my perspective, I see these things as conquerable in almost every single category. And probably in every category, if I really was to sit and analyze it.
Yeah.
In one way or another, I can go about attempting to get that stumbling block out of my way.
Yeah.
Whether it's deficiency in me physically or mentally, I can work on these things. And that's the point, is these used to be things that held me back from the best of myself. My alcoholism that I couldn't beat on my own would have either have me dead or never achieving much of anything, because I was so chained to that. But when Christ freed me from that, it gave me this new opportunity to see all these other things that maybe can hold me back. You know, all these other things that I dabble in. We've talked about it here, but like pornography is one of those stumbling blocks that can keep you a hypocrite and can keep that little darkness on your heart where you're saying like, oh yeah, this and that, and I'm trying to tell other people what to do. But at the same time, you got that little cloud on your heart that hangs over you that you know is not right, and it keeps you just kind of curled up inside of yourself.
Yeah. Absolutely. Just
God
that's
says, I can help you conquer these things, but you have to submit them to me.
there it is.
Right. And as you do, it might be difficult, especially if this is something that's been in your life for a long time, or it's something that you hold in this secret little place, or it's something that you hold up as like, this doesn't affect me, whatever this thing is. And it can become an idol.
Mm-hmm.
And God wants to help you conquer that for him, but also for your own good. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. He does. I think as you choose to walk closer with Christ, you start to feel that urge to do more and be more.
And to change.
Yeah. But not only to change for you, but to change the people around you.
Right.
Right. And
again, because you have some sort of new accountability on yourself.
Yes.
And it's really the spirit inside of you saying, hey, buddy, we can do better.
Yeah. And as you walk in obedience, God will never give us more than we can handle. And so the Bible says that if I can trust you with little things, then I can trust you with big things. Right. And so,
well, God will always meet you at your effort.
For sure he will.
So if you're putting in the work to get to this thing, whatever that thing is, whatever that thing that you're struggling with is, and you might not listen. I know we mentioned pornography here and it ruffles feathers. We always hear that it does. We don't care
at all.
I don't care. I used to look at pornography frequently. Andy used to look at pornography frequently. We've had these conversations, him and I, for years. We made a decision to hand that thing over to God, and we don't anymore. It's as simple as that. And we're not two special guys. We don't have to. And you might go, what does it matter? It doesn't matter. We see all the arguments that people make in the comments. Hey, listen, why are you even writing anything if it doesn't matter? Why are you getting so festered up? I think it's because it does matter, and you know that it matters, at
Mhm.
least somewhere. And we've went about laying out the scientific reasons why, and we've laid out the moral reasons why. Listen, you do what you want to do with yourself always. We're only just trying to lay out another path. We do think, however, that or alcoholism or overspending or any little secrets that you're keeping if you're having an affair or whatever that little secret stuff is, it's keeping you from the highest and best version of yourself. We're saying that each one of these is an opportunity, even from the greatest, which is where you're probably going to start, to the smallest. These are all going to be like these, what you're saying. And this is what I think is the bigger deal when you became elder at the church, is like it's an honor as you take on these battles and as you get to now walk, and you call it pride. This is a different kind of pride.
It's confidence.
It's confidence because you're like, hey, God, this
Because
is
God
hard
is
work.
with me, confidence, by the way.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
God, we're doing it.
Yeah.
We're doing it.
Yeah.
We're beating these things. And these are some of these things you'll go like, man, I never even thought this was a thing. And then you realize it is a thing. And then you realize, oh, crap, this is a hard thing. But then you start beating it. You start winning against this thing.
Mhm.
And you go like, okay. And then someone invites you and says, hey, man, I see you, which is what Mike did and the crew did. They say, hey, Andy, we see you. We see the work you've put in, bro. Join us.
Yeah.
And you go like, really? Okay. And again, it's that purpose. It steps into that place. So it's an honor then for you to walk this hard path, because not everybody walks it. We know the numbers. 80% of dudes.
Watch pornography.
Okay. 80%. So you're in this small portion of guys that don't. You hold your head high and you go, yeah, I don't. And you don't have to. You can if you want to. That's another thing. Again, all you're ever going to hear from us on this podcast is our opinion on what we think, what our life was, and what it is now, and the changes that we've made and the choices we've made with God's help. And you do whatever you want to on your own time. If you're this far into it, though, we're 45 minutes into this episode. Start considering some of these things.
Maybe stick around and start thinking about what you do. You know, not everybody is called to be an elder in the church.
Sure.
We're all called to be elder qualified.
Okay.
Right? Every man is called to be.
And what does that mean?
An elder, a qualified elder, is somebody who has good care of his home, a good reputation with outsiders. Bible says a husband of one wife. That doesn't mean you can't be divorced. It just is a polygamy thing that they lived in back then, right? So husband of but one wife, doesn't get drunk on wine. There's a whole list of things that you have to do to be an elder.
Does that mean you can't have a drink?
No, it doesn't mean you can't have a drink. Yes, excuse me. Yes, you can have a drink.
Oh, you can have a drink.
It just says don't be drunk.
Don't be drunk.
That's all it says.
Okay.
Don't be drunk.
All right.
But these are all when I'm out in public, right? And you don't know who's watching, right? So I want to live my life in public like I do behind closed doors. I want to live my life behind closed doors as I do in public. So that way, when people see me, it's a matter of integrity. I don't have to fake it till I make it. Right.
Well, again, you don't have to be a hypocrite.
I don't want to be a hypocrite. I want to put my life out there for people to know that I've made a lot of mistakes and I will keep making mistakes, but my mistakes look different than they used to look.
But today I have victory.
Yes.
That's the point. I made a lot of mistakes and I was the loser. And I was a loser for a long time. I look back at it and just go like, I'm mortified at some of the decisions I made.
You know, my middle son's getting married next month and I'm doing his wedding. And I've just started writing like my sermon from him. And as I do so, it's really caused me to reflect a ton. Just thinking about my son growing up and these glimpses you have of him growing up of things he's done along the way and moments you've had with him. And I just think so much about, you know, the span of time where I just wasn't involved and I wasn't there. And, you know, God's gracious in working through that. But if you can be self-reflective of your life, I think it's so invaluable for you to be able to take a step back and look at choices you've made along the way and then be wise enough to reflect and go, you know, I screwed up.
Fell short here.
I fell short here. I fell short here. So how do I reorientate my life in such a way that I don't fall short?
Right.
Right. And that's all we're talking about, like with the Christian walk, is you start to consider, like, I've been following Christ for a while. What do I do next? And I think that's the question everybody needs to be asking. What do I do next? The Bible tells us that, you know, we are one body, but we are many parts. So we all have a different role inside that church. We all have something that we can do. When I'm at church and I see these two ladies, we have these two sisters that are these behind the scenes ladies. They just remind me of my mother. They're just there all the time working, and nobody knows who they are. Nobody ever sees them, but they're organizing and they're doing administrative things and they're making coffee and they're doing all these things behind the scene that makes that church service flow the way it does.
Mm-hmm.
And so often when we're thinking about, well, what does it look like for me? It's like a lot of people, well, I want to be the guy up on the platform, and it's
Sure.
like probably
I want all the attention.
Probably you don't.
In a way.
Yeah, you really don't. You
Or
don't.
I want the goodwill. I don't know that that everybody wants the attention, but I want people to think that I'm this, and this, and this, and
Yeah.
all positive, by the way.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want the attaboys all the time.
Not everybody wants to be the two women that work in the background that maybe don't get a lot of congratulations, a lot of pats on the back. They probably do from the guy who gets the most adoration.
Yep.
He's the one back there going, God, you guys kill it. Thank you so much. You make me look better.
Yeah, and so having said
They're
that,
the Donnie. They're the Donnie of...
They're the Donnie. That's
Yeah.
right.
You guys don't ever see him, but he's behind us, kicking butt, doing awesome stuff all the time.
Week after
It
week.
makes us so much better.
Week after week.
Turn to episode 10 and then come back to this episode and tell us what you think.
If this was you and I, man, we'd be on walkie-talkies with like a Polaroid.
It just wouldn't be working. So when do you do you feel closest to God?
Real quick, having said that, if you go to a church and you know who those people are that are the behind-the-scenes workers, give them some love. Week to week, just give them that encouragement. They need those attaboys too. So what was your question?
When do you feel like you're closest to God? Or when do you feel like, if you have a big decision to make, how do you go about approaching God with it? And how does that look?
Here's my process that I would recommend.
And maybe you can give us a specific example
Yeah.
of this. We obviously last year we went through the housing thing. Maybe that's one, or, that was just my initial thoughts.
That's a great question. So there's a process I go through when I'm thinking about making a big decision, especially when it comes to spiritual. So the first thing I do is pray. If I have an idea or something comes to me, somebody says, hey, what do you think about this? First thing I'm going to do is pray. God, what do you think about that? What do you want me to do with that? Number one. Number two, I run it through the Word of God to see if it's something that's from Him. If, in that interview, you're going to hear from Pastor Mike. We're going to talk about how do you hear from God. I run it by older men,
Mm-hmm.
people that are mentors, people that I respect, and then I'll usually make my decision on that. So you asked me the question. So an example of that, the house is a perfect example. We were selling our house, everything was going smooth. We felt like God was ordaining it, and then we had some things come up, and I started to feel that tinge in my heart of, hey, maybe we shouldn't be doing this. So I started praying. Just God, I want to release this thing to you. I had my heart tied on it.
Yeah.
And I want to release this to you. And then I went to a brother of mine and had him start praying. And he's one of my prayer mentors. And so he started praying and I was asking his wisdom on it. And then we prayed for a while and then we came back together in a conversation and we both came up to the same conclusion that, hey, it was time to walk away from it and pull it off. And we did that. And because we walked in obedience and doing it that way, there was peace. Was I frustrated at first? Absolutely. But then there was just peace. And I think that's the one promise we have from God, right? There's no other promises in the Bible other than you'll have peace. Peace when you shouldn't. And that's what He gives to us, right?
Philosophical, right? So I want to philosophize for a moment here.
Okay.
I don't know this to be fact. We're going to discuss it and you'll tell me what you think.
Okay.
Biblically, in the Old Testament, God was the God of sacrifice. Is that a bold claim? He had specific sacrifices you would make.
Yes.
You do tithing.
Sacrifices were necessary.
I believe He's the same God then. He's the same God now. I think God demands sacrifice from us. What do I mean by that? The first question I asked you is, when are you closest to God? And I'll answer it for myself. I'm closest to God when I'm quitting something that either is good for me or bad for me, and it's hard. That's when I'm closest to God.
Give me an example.
When I quit drinking, it was very, very, very hard. I was taking drugs at the same time. I went through that. Certainly one of the hardest times of my life. Was 5-6 weeks of just my body felt like there was broken glass inside of it all the time. It was awful, and it was so depleted. I was in such rough shape. And when else was I close to God? I was close to God when I really wanted to meet a good woman and settle down. And when I met my wife, what did I do to get to that? I had to give up all those old phone numbers, all the other women, and block some of the ones that maybe wouldn't call and da da da. Like I had to get rid of stuff so that I wasn't getting new messages from women that I'd accumulated over the years, like trading cards. When I wanted to get out of the bar scene and stop bartending, I had to give up the good money for the risk of who the heck knows for a couple paint jobs I had lined up. And I quit a job. I think each time I go through a struggle and I approach God with it, or I have something and I approach God with it, I'm very close to him. Why? Because I become dependent on him. Now, I'm not saying that I'm not also dependent on him at other times. I'm consistently dependent. The more I become clear that he operates in all the realms, I go, oh, wow, okay, give this up and give him the glory. So take my crown too when I succeed. Yeah. But I think, and this is where I'm going with this next, because this is kind of this second phase. How do I go about trying to see what my next adventure is? I'm now positing it to the viewer and saying, if you're lacking purpose or adventure, maybe it's time for prayer's the start every time. So I love that you said that. You're totally right. Start praying. Hey, God, I'm feeling unpurposeful now, or I'm feeling disconnected from you. I'm feeling whatever this thing is that's not the highest and best. And God might, in that place, I posit that he will, again, philosophizing, that he's going to say, this is what's blocking you from me, blank. Or he might say, I want you to do this thing. And I cannot help but think that this, so I wrote this down. This is why I said this will tie into it. Fasting. She said fasting in her little note there on the devotional. See, again, by the way, women can write fantastic devotionals. Women are very important in God's mission. I hope that we always make that clear here from this pulpit. We think women are very important in God's purpose and in his mission. Always. My wife is
vital,
is so important to my walk with God every single day.
Yeah, mine too.
Okay. But I think if you're trying to get closer, you have to make a sacrifice sometimes. Maybe there's not something huge that you're doing, but maybe you're still feeling like it's not enough. And maybe we see in the Bible 50 plus times the image of fasting. Moses fasted 40 days in Exodus 34 and 28. 40 days when he got the 10 Commandments. Right. Jesus fasted 40 days in Matthew 4, 1 through 11. He fasted 40 days in the desert. Why? He was connecting with God and really receiving the mission that he was about to head out on. Is that true?
Yes, it is.
Okay. David fasted for 7 days when he lost his son. And it was before his son died, and his son still died at the end. See, that's the thing. I want to point that out too. This is the thing with your house. Things don't always work out great for exactly how you want them to as a Christian. You can pray for something. You can want something so bad, and God can still say no. And he did to David. His son died.
Yeah.
After doing all that, David was his guy. He says, guy after my own heart, yeah?
Yeah.
And then he's praying and he's begging God, please don't let my son die. And his son still died. Now, David went on to praise God so much for the rest of his life.
Yeah, he did. There's that Bible verse that says, all things for your good according to his purpose, right?
So David's fasting was 2 Samuel 12, 16 through 23. The disciples in Acts 13, 2 and 3, they all fasted and prayed prior to sending Paul and Barnabas out on their mission. This is when Paul's still very young in the faith. He's come to visit all these guys, been walking for a while, that seen Jesus, walked with Jesus for years. And then Paul, who was Saul, is there now, and he's kind of the new guy on the block. God's introduced himself to Paul and gave him the name, right?
Yep.
And the guys are recognizing this, but there's still a little bit of, hey, new guy, we're the old guys kind of
Mhm.
thing. And there's some hard nosing, but they still fasted and prayed that he would do the best he could. And the final one I have is Paul, 3 days fasted, Acts 9:9. After his conversion to start his own mission. So he was fasting and praying prior to even meeting with the disciples. Why do I bring that up? Because maybe that's the thing you can do. Specifically, it speaks about in the Bible that fasting makes you more dependent on God. It's a way you can take action to get yourself closer to God. Confession. I've only ever fasted when I had to do colonoscopies. Cancer runs in my family. So I had to start doing those at the age of 38, I think, and I'm 45. I got to do one every couple of years. So I have to fast for 2 days prior to that procedure. I've never intentionally fasted. I'm here to say that I'm going to. I would be too bold if I said I could do it this week. I have a massive project to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm lining up a 3-day fast. I would like to do a 72-hour fast. Why?
Super healthy for you anyways.
Here we go. Fasting does this thing called BDNF, brain-derived nootropic factor. What does that mean? It means you start creating new neural pathways. It causes your brain to eat away at the bad material, the cloudiness that sits on your brain that actually eventually causes Alzheimer's. That's recent information. It's proven that people that fast throughout their life are less likely to get Alzheimer's when they get older.
Interesting.
You start eating the negative cells inside of your body because your body will go into ketosis after 24 hours. So it starts eating away at the unhealthiest of cells in your body. This is all scientifically backed up. By 72 hours, people present as having a almost crystal clear mental focus. Why? I think it's because you're eating away at maybe some of this junk that you take in throughout the day, all the different things. And prayerfully, going to be my intention here, is like having gotten rid of all that junk, but needing God to get through it. If you've ever done a fast for, when I do the one for the colonoscopy, it's miserable. I am miserable. I've never attempted to like pray about it while I'm doing it either. I'm just like, this sucks. And I complain the whole time. I think centering myself on God and allowing it to be in a dedication to him is going to be honoring to him. And that'll be just a different approach than I've ever had on it. So I'm going to do this soon. This will be something we talk about in the next couple of episodes for sure, what my outcome of this is. But again, we like to be fully transparent. So I'm not trying to tell you something I ain't going to do or haven't done, or you should go do it now. And I've never done it. I'm going to be coming back here saying what it was like to have done it. And maybe it'll be junk. Maybe it won't be everything that it says. I doubt it.
I doubt it.
Our friend Rashad, we were wearing his gear, the
Commission 127.
Commission 127 group. Rashad does a fast every year at the beginning of the year, right after. Remember, we talked to him about it.
3-day fast.
He does it every single year, right after New Year's. Why? He said it gets me closer to God. So I look forward to finding out what that is. And I intend to be asking God, and throughout that time, is this, what's this adventure we're on?
Yeah.
What do you want me to do, and how do you want me to do it, and where do you want me to be?
I hear people talk about fasting, and then I'll hear them say, I'm fasting social media, or I'm fasting my phone, or that's fine. But when the Bible talks about fasting, it's fasting food. Why? Because it's a nourishment of your soul, it's a nourishment of your body, and it's hard. Fasting social media is not hard. I just have to put my phone away, and I just don't do it.
Or it might be hard if you're totally addicted.
I
would suggest if you're that addicted that putting down your phone, is that hard?
Yeah, you should probably do that too. But
you should really assess
the whole
getting
part,
back into it ever.
Yeah, the whole part you're talking about there, when I'm fasting food, the reason why I'm doing it is just to not eat. It's because I want to be talking to God through that, because God is going to be the sustainer through that. That's the whole purpose of that fast.
All of these people, these real people that really existed, believe in Jesus and who he says he is, that's you, dear listener. All those other people, these are all people that are documented in history that did this and received a great benefit. And now there's just a bunch of science. If everybody loves science, there's a bunch of science out now that says it's very healthy for you to do.
Yes.
Then I love the idea that there's new neural pathways created. I love that it eats the plaque off my brain. I love that it starts eating away at bad cells inside of my body. Potential cancer cells is the actual statement made by this doctor that I was watching. So it's like, holy smokes, Dr. Berg. It's like, what else can happen here? And at the same time, I feel like I'm going to need to rest on God. As someone I don't have a lot of fat cells to bleed off of here. It's going to be pretty miserable 3 days, potentially.
Yeah.
I hope it not to be. I hope approaching it from this angle, it's not as hard as the previous ones have been, in fact. I won't be having to drink down that horrible stuff that makes you crap your brains out. So,
Yeah, of course I do.
I won't have to do that. So
And
maybe that lacking that aspect of it might be useful
And
too.
I'm not thinking about going in and they're putting cameras in my body either. So,
Yeah.
I can actually just really focus. I'm going to do the challenge with you, man.
You are?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll do that with you. I've
You
thought
ever
about
done
it.
a fast like that?
I have not that long. I've done
crazy, right?
I've done plenty of 24-hour fasts, but
I've done 24-hour fast unintentionally.
yeah, but a 24-hour fast really isn't that hard.
Listen,
Not that hard.
some pretty miraculous things start happening in just 24 hours. Hey, I wrote them down, or I got them right here. I don't normally take my phone out, but here we are. So 0 to 4 hours is called the anabolic phase, which is business as usual as your body breaks down nutrients from food and converts them into energy and body tissue. 0 to 4 hours. I ate, here's what it does, and then I take a crap. Phase 2, 4 to 16 hours. Catabolic phase, where you begin to metabolize body fat as energy in autography is activated. So, boom. My body's actually there's nothing in here now at this point in time. There's nothing in the stomach that's being worked apart. Now it's probably working through whatever's leftovers in the intestines and then starting to start work on whatever else it can. Phase 3, 16 to 24 hours, fat metabolism, autophagy, and the production of human growth hormone all increase. So here you are now, your body's starting to burn fat internally, and you're just about on that ketosis, which it's about to transfer over to that. Phase 4, 24 to 72 hours, increased production of ketones that fuel most cells in your body, while BDNF, which is that brain-derived nootropic factor, increases to support brain function and neuroregeneration. It's literally fixing things in your brain. As you go beyond 72 hours, the fat-burning neurotropic and anti-aging benefits activated in the previous hours are enhanced. So if you go over 72 hours, in fact, it can obviously at some point in time, you can die.
Yeah, it starts burning through muscle and
right. Things that we ain't trying to lose. But a good 72 hours, as you can hear there's going to be scientific things that'll back up a move like that. So I'm kind of excited about it, actually.
Yeah, and in those fasts, you obviously are going to be drinking water throughout the entire thing, right?
Oh, yeah, clearly.
They even have some where you can drink like broth and
Sure, and maybe I'll do that. I don't know.
Yeah.
The point is I'm not going to eat anything for 72 hours and just see. And I'm going to be prayerful. I'm going to be intentional. It's going to be hard. And I'm going to be talking to God. Hey, what else can I be doing in this life that you've given me, God? How else can I honor you? What other things can I dedicate to you? Is there anything in me that's just not living up to what could be? Because I want to be the best version of myself for you, God, for my family. And let's get after it, you know? And I think if you don't, again, this is the encouragement of today's episode, is if you don't have something that is haunting you, we talk frequently from that place because we're two guys that were haunted for so long by huge deficiencies in our life that made us I was dead. I was a dead man walking, and it doesn't sound like you were far down the road.
The Bible says you were dead in your trespasses, right?
So
that's what we were.
And and just our lifestyles.
Mm-hmm.
And God saved us from that.
He did.
And that isn't everybody's story. Mm-hmm. Some people are doing pretty darn good. What we're here saying, though, is there a next step you could be taking towards God? So if it's not bleeding out one of these bad evilnesses of your deep, dark recesses in your soul, then maybe that's great, by the way. Hey, congratulations. Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Then maybe it's time to say, hey, God, I'm going to fast and I'm going to dive into you and I'm going to let you take over this space and lead me to my next adventure.
Yeah, they take risk. That's the the part that people are scared of is, well, what if I go out and try something and it fails? Well, then you try something different. If you feel like there's a calling by God on your life to do something greater, then you have to start taking action. And very often because of fear, like people will just sit back and they'll not do anything at all just because they're worried that they're going to fail at something, or that maybe, I also hear people say, well, I'm just praying and waiting for God to give me the direction.
Hey, what does Mike say when we show up?
God shows up.
What's that? When we show up?
God shows up.
Right. It's brilliant. It's
totally
right.
Brilliant.
That's the whole point of this thing, though, by the way.
Yeah.
If you do something like this, you're dedicating to God, he's going to show up. We're not here positing that there's a maybe. I'm here to tell you that every single time I put effort in my life, this is the whole examples I'm laying out here. If I haven't made it clear yet, let me make it crystal clear. Every time I show up and dedicate something to God, again, that God of sacrifice, as my philosophy would say, when I'm sacrificing to God, he's always right there.
Every time.
And he's just like, hey, buddy, let's go. And
Every
he's
time.
always got something else for
Every
me.
time.
It might not be me getting a new house. It might not be me having, like David, having my son rescued. But it's going to be the next thing that's great for me and great for him.
Yeah.
And he will always be there for that when you sacrifice yourself for him.
Every time, man.
Okay.
Every time. And the blessing that comes with that as well is that if I am out doing for Christ and I'm working for Christ, whether that's where Christ wants me or not, I still feel rewarded and I still feel peaceful that I'm making an effort to advance his kingdom.
Yeah,
because
it's honorable, man.
Yeah.
I'm sacrificing this short little peon existence that I have for a greater purpose, I hope.
It's all that it is.
And like all great stories have that formula where the hero makes a sacrifice for the greater good.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that I'm the hero. I'm not saying you're the hero. I'm saying the sacrifice is the heroic thing.
Mm-hmm.
And just intentionality towards that sacrifice to honor the God of the universe is pretty awesome, man.
It is. It is. And, we have, living in where we live at in the United States, like we have nothing to fear. I think about people that have to make sacrifices that live in other parts of the world that like could actually cost them their life to follow Christ. And we don't have to live in that here. And I'm thankful that we don't have to live in that here, that we get to just walk freely with our relationship with Christ. But that freedom is important, that we don't just take that freedom for granted. Like there's still, I think, a calling to every man's life that we need to be serving in some aspect of life, that we need to be able to be passing on to the next generation what we've learned. And so that requires time. And you being able to have margin in your life to create that time necessary to spend with people. And that time spent with people can very often just be just a text message. Hey, man, how you doing? How can I walk with you? How can I pray with you? I have gobs of guys that just throughout the week that were just texting one another, just how you doing? How can I pray for you? And building those relationships is foundational for you to be able to do anything great at all. Because when I have guys around me that I'm a team, like we're a wolf pack, we can get a lot more done, get a lot more accomplished if I got some heavy hitting pipe hitters for Jesus out there. And that's, that's why we're doing this, is we want to be able to create that for people, to be able to push people forward.
Yeah, boy, I think that kind of just says it all. You got anything else here today, buddy? I know it's a bit under hour 20, but that feels like the message was sent.
Yeah. I think anything else would just be trampling on our words. And
couldn't agree more. Gosh, what a great, thank you guys so much for joining us today. This was episode 43. Taking your next steps really is what it boils into. Like, where are you at with God? Where do you want to be with God? Are you already scooting? Well, thanks for taking time out of your busy day to check us out. Appreciate you getting this far into it. If that's the case, awesome.
Yeah.
If you're not, here's some just pretty simple ideas. Dig the recesses of your mind. Is there something that I can dedicate to God today? If not, maybe it's joining Andy and I on this 72-hour fast some point in time. I guess what we could do is figure something out and then announce it.
Yeah.
And then anybody that wants to could join us on it.
Absolutely.
And we get a little text thread going through or email thread or something to see how that goes. But we're always trying to challenge because we love challenge. We're guys that like to go out and get after it. We always have been. And again, I said it before, God's the God of adventure. He wants to take you on the next awesome thing. Yeah. That's how I always feel about it. He wants me doing the next awesome thing. He wants to be part of it. And when I'm intentional towards trying to meet him there, he's always faithful to show up.
Yes, man.
So, guys, thank you again for joining us. We are the Untrained Philosophical Discussionists. My name's Jonny Hanson. It's my good buddy Andy Lamb, and we just want to pray that you have a deep and fulfilling relationship with Jesus, and that he blesses you all the days of your life.
And all God's people said.
Well, he said amen.
Sure did, buddy. Have a good week, man.
Take care, guys. Thanks again.